BBC World News, our top stories. Tension behind the friendly handshake. North Korea condemns the United States for demanding sanctions be maintained over its nuclear program. It comes as a UN report says the country's nuclear and missile efforts are continuing 2 months after the summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. 3 people have died as a result of soaring temperatures in Spain. Europe's heat wave is so severe it may break records. Hello and welcome to BBC World News. North Korea's foreign minister has criticised the United States for urging other countries to maintain sanctions against Pyongyang. Ri Yong-ho made the comments at a regional forum in Singapore where he met briefly with the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Earlier, Mr. Pompeo said pressure must be maintained on North Korea as the UN released a report saying Pyongyang is continuing its nuclear programs. From Singapore, Karishma Vaswani reports.
Less than 2 months since the historic Trump-Kim summit, which took place in Singapore, the Americans are back. The U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is here to meet with his counterparts at the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And while he acknowledged the process to denuclearize North Korea will take time, he also stressed how vital it is to keep up the pressure on Pyongyang.
I've also emphasized the importance of maintaining diplomatic and economic pressure on North Korea to achieve the final fully verified denuclearization of the DPRK, as agreed to by Chairman Kim. It's worth remembering this isn't just an American security goal. It is clear our partners and allies within ASEAN know how important the denuclearization of North Korea is for their own security.
Mr. Pompeo's comments come as a report commissioned by the UN Security Council says North Korea has not stopped its nuclear and missile programs, violating UN sanctions. Mr. Pompeo didn't directly address that, but did say that Russia has reportedly started issuing work permits to North Korean laborers, which Moscow has denied.
We expect the Russians and all countries to abide by the UN Security Council resolutions and enforce sanctions on North Korea. Any violation that detracts from the world's goal of finally fully denuclearizing North Korea would be something that America would take very seriously.
It's been less than 2 months since President Trump and Kim Jong-un met at the historic Trump-Kim summit and pledged to work towards denuclearization. But we're still nowhere closer to figuring out what that actually means. All that Mr. Pompeo has said here at the ASEAN meetings in Singapore is that the timeline, in part, is up to the North Korean leader. And until then, economic sanctions on Pyongyang will stay. Karishma Vaswani, BBC News, Singapore.
Well, Spain is still in the grip of a heat wave that's brought temperatures so high they threaten to break European records. Southern Spain is forecast to reach 46 degrees today after hitting 46.4 degrees yesterday. So far, 3 people have died in the heat, and forecasters say the current European record of 48 degrees could be broken in the coming days. Seema Katecha reports from Cordova.
Well, we've been working in this heat since the early hours of this morning, and it hasn't felt very pleasant at all. And I think people who live here in Cordoba, most of them share the same viewpoint. Of course, people here are used to hot summers, but this weather really has been exceptional. We know that the highest temperature recorded in the south of Spain yesterday was 46.4 degrees Celsius. And here in Cordoba at around midnight last night, it was still 37 degrees. So very uncomfortable conditions, and we expect this hot weather to continue for at least a few days yet, especially these temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius. Now, we also know that 3 people have died in Spain as a result of this torrid weather, and we know that 39 of the 50 provinces in Spain have heat warnings in place. So medical experts are telling people to stay cool, to stay indoors, especially during the afternoon when those temperatures peak, and to wear light and loose clothing to keep themselves safe from this very uncomfortable weather.
Simi Katecha there. Well, meanwhile, in neighbouring Portugal, emergency services are fighting a fire in the south of the country. Hundreds of firefighters are fighting the blaze in the tourist zone of Algarve. Authorities have evacuated 2 villages in the area and 10 water-carrying aircraft are being used to put out the flames. Well, last summer, 114 people were killed in 2 massive forest fires in the country. Let's take a look at some of the other stories now. The Trump administration has overturned bans on the use of pesticides linked to the declining population of bees. The government will also allow genetically modified crops to be grown in some protected wildlife areas. It names more than 50 national wildlife refuges where the new policy now applies. The dramatic change in policy has attracted heavy criticism from environmentalists. Hundreds have gathered in Harare for the funeral procession of 52-year-old grandmother Sylvia Matambo. She was shot in the back by a soldier on Wednesday afternoon, and she was caught in the crossfire after President Emerson Mnangagwa's government deployed soldiers to quash protests by opposition supporters. The trial of Donald Trump's former election campaign chief, Paul Manafort, has heard claims that his accountant helped disguise his foreign income so he could pay less in tax. Cindy Laporta said she'd been told to concoct a $900,000 loan on his tax return in 2015. Mr. Manafort denies bank fraud, tax fraud and failing to report foreign bank accounts. Now, following their 2-week ordeal trapped in a flooded Thai cave, 11 boys and their football coach have completed 9 days living as Buddhist monks. This period of quiet reflection is a tradition in Thailand for males who suffer adversity. The 25-year-old coach, who's received monk's orders, will stay on for 3 months. One of the boys did not participate, as he's a Christian. The experience was seen as a spiritual cleansing for the group and to fulfill a promise made by the families to remember the former Navy SEAL diver Saman Gunan, who died during the rescue operation. Well, much more coming up on BBC World News. You can, of course, get in touch with me on Twitter. I'm at Regid Ahmed BBC.